We're live, Will Leach. We have a special guest. You've been somewhere. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour with our favorite scientist. He's not a mad scientist, he doesn't wear a lab coat. He's a behavioral marketing scientist. It's Will Leach. He's our favorite author. Today, we have Ushi Patel. She's the founder and CEO of Ushi. Where did that name come from? We'll get to the bottom of all of this. Welcome, team, to the Mindstate Marketing Hour.
Well, hello there, Steve.
Hi.
It's good to see you. It's good to see you again. How are you?
I'm excellent. So
Yeah.
let's first I want to introduce Ushi instead of leave her over on the side. Then I want to catch up about where you went, and then we'll get down to business today. Will, you want to tell us a little bit about Ushi?
I do. Everybody, welcome to the show, Ushi Patel. We're going to go a little bit over our bio in a second, but I met Ushi a little over a year ago, and I just fell in love with her spirit. She's going to talk today, well, probably about lots of different things. But what I think Ushi does is she has just this spirit and heart for women and women entrepreneurs and helping them find their voice. And she does it in a really unique way. I hope we'll get into. I have a question. We'll see if you answered, Ushi, but I do want to talk about your approach to how you bring out the essence of your clients and the power, I think, and almost the brand identity of women entrepreneurs and executives out there. But even more than that, she is globally recognized as a brand strategist, creative consultant, and now also she's a business owner. She's been a business owner for a while. You are a CEO of your own company, and your work is just incredible in terms of building out brands, but also directed campaigns. And you have empowered, from what I hear, it says here, more than 300,000 women in India and Africa. That's amazing. And so I want to talk about your storytelling, your style, but also more importantly, your journey. And I'm looking forward to getting into your journey of how you found your place where you are now, where you're the CEO of a company doing amazing, brilliant things for your customers. So Ushi, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And whenever I hear an introduction like that, I'm always like, oh, really? That's me? It is. I'll own it. But I think, I'll own it. And that's exactly what I teach, is how to own it. But then I listen to it and I'm like, wait, who's he? Oh, he's talking about me.
Well, good. We're going to talk a little bit about that today.
Today we're going to talk about 2 failures, 2 swings, and a hit. We're going to talk about 2 failures and a success with Ushi. But wait. Will, where did you go last week? Last week we pre-recorded your show while you were on an airplane. It played.
Yep, good.
But where'd you go?
Okay, so I went to a little place called, I thought it was pronounced Copenhagen, but I think it might be called Copenhagen. I'm not sure about that, Steve. We're going to figure that out. But I was visiting with a company out there that does neuroscience marketing. So I've been fascinated in the last couple of months of bringing in neuroscience and psychology into advertising. So I was meeting with a great company out there looking at technology that's going to help, managers of brands and advertising firms bring in the most scientific way of testing creative that's known to mankind. So we like to tell ourselves that anyway. So yeah, it's really great. And by the way, Steve, my friend is the CMO of Burger King. I'm throwing names, I'm name dropping. But here's what I noticed. If you guys ever want to do burgers, I would have thought Texas is like the burger capital of the world, right?
Dude, don't say it. Don't say it, Will. Don't say it. You're in Texas.
It's Copenhagen. These guys are like, they love burgers. I was texting the CMO. I'm like, you guys got to do an ethnography here because every other place is a burger bar. So they have crazy flavors. I had crazy types of burgers, but they are crazy burger fans out in Copenhagen. So,
Will, you muted yourself by accident. You unplugged or something. He can't hear me. Will.
Can't hear you.
Plug it back in. Your lips are moving, but I can't hear what you're...
Steve, I thought you were totally lying about this right now. Do you hear me? I totally thought you were lying when you were doing that. It's okay. Sorry, guys. I'm in. It wasn't until Ushi said I'm unplugged. Oh my God, she wouldn't lie to me. I thought it was you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Although we could have kept it going. That was the Texas burger people being like, he doesn't deserve airtime right now.
Yeah,
Right,
exactly. Delete. So I think it's not Haagen-Dazs, it's Haagen-Dazs, right?
Haagen-Dazs. That feels like it's Haagen-Dazs. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that answers your question.
Oh, I have to tell you 2 Indian stories then, because Haagen-Dazs in Hindi means cow shit. Sorry if I'm not allowed to say that. So can you imagine that brand in India, like epic fail? The other thing is you would think like burgers have no place in India. Well, they do. And interestingly, the Burger King Whopper, so you can tell your friend this, is like the jam. It tastes so good there. It's like so weird. You come here and you're like, that's not yummy. And then you go there and they have their like special ketchup and you're like, yes. So anyone going to India, Indian Whopper.
That's the unique, cool place to go. I love it. I'll have to let them know.
There's not going to be a burger in there though, by the way. Like some people get it and there's like no burger, but like it's the Indian Whopper. Yeah. It's so good.
Whatever suits. Cool.
Yeah.
So Ushi, we were talking before the show, before Will had to come on and dominate the whole conversation, right? So we were having a great conversation, and you did a TED Talk.
I did.
Right?
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that TED Talk. Obviously, when I think about doing a TED Talk, there's a lot of preparation. What do I talk about? You probably practice. You probably like doubt yourself. I'm curious about and the topic of it as well. Yeah. Give us a little backstory on that.
Well, the backstory has a lot to do with my epic failure. you want me to talk about 2, and I was like, well, I've got one that can count as 2. But the short of it is that at the we can meander into the story, but the short of it is at the end of the failure turns success. I was at a conference. It was more like a mini conference of impact investors and people who are trying to do great work all over the world. And they randomly, I'm thinking I'm all prepped and I'm going to be like so great around business and all these things. And one of the people there said, hey, could you recite poetry? And I was like, okay, fine. And we're in this like beautiful mountain location. These people are awesome, really heart-centered people. Like they're just like so inspiring. So like I'm in the mood. I recite the poetry. I talk about how the poetry came about. And then the person that was in the audience, there was a person in the audience who heads up the TEDx in Vail. And he came to me and he said, I think that my audience would love to hear what you have to say, because a large part of his audience were people who were trying to come back into who they are through nature. And that was part of what had happened for me, as I had taken this year off and spent extended time in nature, sort of found myself, so to speak, like came back to myself, wrote a book of poetry. And then I realized then that they just wanted to hear the experience of sort of making that life shift and heading in a direction that's truer to yourself. And so that talk and also the poetry is all about that experience. But it would have never come about if I wasn't in that experience, right? Like the mindset that created what I'm saying is the failures would have never created a scenario like that, because I didn't know, like, I don't have like the guide to get on TEDx. I didn't even have an aspiration to be on I didn't even have the aspiration to talk. I didn't realize what a powerful force it is in the world and the credibility it can build for you and the impact that you can have. And to this day, the clients that come because you share something sort of openly, you share something and that's very personal that turned your life around, can turn other people's life around. And they just want to be with you. They don't really even care what your product is. They're just like, who are you?
They're drawn to.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Heck of a story. I didn't know that. That's awesome. I should join these conversations earlier so I can at least hear this stuff. That's awesome.
Yes.
Ushi, let's take a step back and give everybody a bit of a journey of who you are and how did you kind of wind up to where you are today on the most epic of all shows, the Mindstate Marketing Hour. So tell us
it's pretty epic.
It's an award-winning podcast.
Yeah.
Award-winning.
Yes.
That's right.
I love it. It is. I saw that. Congrats.
Appreciate it.
I'm like, so it started the day I was born, but it kind of did. And also I should tell you, so my name is Urvashi, which means celestial nymph, which I'm like, I don't get it. Don't identify with celestial nymph. And on the same exact day, my father started calling me Ushi, and Ushi caught on, and I embrace it because to me it really reflects me between worlds. I'm the first daughter and granddaughter born in the U.S. of Indian immigrants. And that's why I say it starts then, because I really grew up in this world of what I call the storm of narrative, right? Like, I'm Indian, I'm American, and actually my family from my great grandfather's time had come from Africa. So they all immigrated from Gujarat to Africa to the US. So I had so many cultural streams and cultural narratives coming through my world, which is beautiful, but it's also like super confusing for a kid who's like, wait, who am I within this, And the who am I within this for a long time became more about everyone else's narrative. And, now as I talk to my friends and colleagues from other heritages, they're all like, we have the same thing, right? Chinese American, Jewish American, like when you have all these narratives coming in, and now it's even amplified by social media because there's story everywhere.
Yeah.
So I think that translated, which it does for a lot of Indian Americans, into overachieving perfectionism. I got the best grades, right? Like I was an artist, but I had an MBA. I was going to be an engineer, but then when the class was full of 30 guys, I was like, oh, I'm out of here. Like I was just living in this world where I was definitely achieving, right? You would look at my resume, you would look at awards and promotions, and you're like, dude, who's this girl? And I really identified with the external source of validation and praise to define my life and my career. Now, the upside of that is like, yeah, you're living a pretty freaking good life. The wealth is there, the contribution is there, but the piece that was missing for me was joy. And I need, the way that translated is just being super tired, not making time for the people I love. I don't even remember the last time I took a walk. So I started getting into that cycle.
Yeah.
And that's really where my journey is. And I should say, how did the brand come about? Well, my expertise in brand. So here I am, like, who am I? And yet I'm really, really good at helping people see who they are. Right. And a lot of that came as the combo of creative artist and businesswoman and bringing the two together. And at that time, that was like the era of Steve Jobs coming on the scene and talking about how brand is so much more important, and creating value and relationship is so much more important than bottom line, right? Or that it creates bottom line. So I was sort of riding the waves with Steve Jobs and his whole brand thing. And I started to get my ideas to market quickly and successfully. So naturally, people were like, hey, I want to learn from you. I was 27. In hindsight, I'm like, oh, thank you that they wanted to learn from me. But like, I didn't know myself. And yet I could give them all this great advice, and they were succeeding. Their revenue was increasing. Their loyalty was increasing. So, and also, by the way, at that time too, it was like everybody and their mother. Like if an enterprise called me, I did it. If a personal brand called me, I did it. If a small business owner called me, I did it. So, it was fragmented. It was successful. It was fragmented. I, though, at home was like Meanwhile, I hadn't gotten married yet. And so, like in Indian families, they're just like, she's definitely doomed. She doesn't have a husband.
Oh, yeah.
And
you're 27, you don't have a husband, you failed,
yeah.
right?
Oh my gosh. And you know what? He didn't come till 36. So I was definitely pushing like, oh God, what's happening to my child? So all of that storm, right? I love to call it a storm. I love storms, but like in my head, I'm like, whoa. Like, who are you? Are you a brand consultant? Do you work for enterprises? Are you a mom? Or do you want to be a wife? Like, and all these identity structures also in my face. And it's just like how ironic that that's exactly the process I facilitate for people. So I call it a failure because for me, I failed myself. Like, I dropped myself. And I'm not like, probably there was times where I was like, oh, Ushi, and mad about it and had some more fierce emotion around it. Right. Yeah. But on the other side of it, I was like, oh, duh, of course you dropped yourself. Like, look what was happening. And, without that kind of guidance or even framework, of course. And by the way, again, I talk to thousands of women. And the same freaking narrative, disempowering narrative, is running through all of their heads. Like, I cannot be who I am to have what I want, right? I have to change who I am to have
I love that.
Yeah, I have to change who I am to have the money, the trajectory, the man, the woman, the whatever, like I have to change who I am. So I was like, A, I don't want to live like this. B, I would love to be a part of that renaissance or that revolution in women that could, I'm not talking about like, showing up to the boardroom in a bikini. It's not that kind of be who you are. It's really coming back to your own beauty and grace, and then letting that be a natural vibration around you, so people are magnetized towards you. And they just like I said, like, there's no way I could have orchestrated that TED Talk. No way. Also, like, maybe not even totally qualified to do it at that point, right? But I had sunk back into myself, and I had known what I wanted to give and who I was. And I was really connected to my beauty and grace and the gifts of my life. And that's what that person felt. And then, of course, yeah, you prepare, you do the rigor of stage presence and speaking and crafting a message. I'm not saying you just sit there in your magnetism. But the way I found it was really detaching from that cycle. I think most people call it the hamster wheel. I hear so many people in it right now, especially with like the layoffs and post-COVID working hours and not working and commuting. And what do I want to do? And who am I, is still the question. And I think, whether it's a business or a personal brand, I think people, when they live in that conflict, that's where the burnout comes from, and the like directionless feeling. So all that's to say is I took a year off. Again, didn't know I was going to be a poet. I was drawn to it. It gave me joy. It also helped me make sense of my situation. So I'm like, I'm going to go with this, It ended up being published because, maybe that overachieving self never leaves. But again, through a series of very serendipitous events, I met the publisher at a party. She was like, who are you? Cool. Tell me your story. I want to publish your poetry, like have 5 poems on my desk in a week. I was like, oh, you think I'm a real okay. And I did it because I loved it. And I didn't do it to get published, and so much of my life previously would have been like mechanically do this to get and it just didn't lead to the, so my point is those things work, but like, if you want the joy and you want the presence and the ease and the calm energy, you got to come back to yourself. And that's therein lies the success of that initial failure of like not putting the relationship between me and me first. That's what I would say the fail moment was. And really relying on the external source. So that's my journey, and all the other things packed in too.
So real quick. So the hamster wheel thing I identify with. I think Steve and I actually have talked about this probably 2 years ago, this idea on a show. So I remember I was in corporate America, and I was starting to get into the hamster wheel as a director at PepsiCo, to where you can make the next level. You're going to start giving up vacations. You just are, or you're going to be available no matter where you are in the world. You're going to be available. And so I saw that lifestyle. And I remember when I left Pepsi, it wasn't the only reason why I left, but when I left, I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I now have my own business. I can do whatever I want. I have all this freedom. And at first, I kind of did work less. I found that I worked less running my own business than I did running somebody else's. But then all of a sudden, you get in the wheel. You start taking on clients. Some clients you don't really even want to take on, but you're like, but that's a great opportunity. It's Procter & Gamble or it's Coca-Cola, whatever. And then all of a sudden, I remember I had a moment. And my moment was at the end of 2016.
Yes.
And I was on a plane coming back from the UK, and I started crying on this plane. It was my best year ever. Financially, my best year ever. But I wasn't near my family at all. I traveled so much that year, and we brought in so much money. But I remember it was in December, and I remember crying, thinking like, well, I left Pepsi because I didn't want to do this. And I got all those accolades. I got the money, and I was, successful in air quotes, but I felt like such a failure. Was there a moment for me? I knew something had to change, and it changed within 3 weeks. In fact, it changed within 3 weeks. Was there a moment for you that there was like, I hit ground bottom in that experience? So like, something has to change. This is not what I want to do.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Fortunately, I wasn't crying on a plane. I feel like all my, I would totally have been like, I totally get it, bro. Let's have a glass of water or something on the plane with you. I've had moments on planes though. This moment was so searing is the word. I was, hustling through. Anyone who lives in San Francisco, 4th and Townsend, right where the trains come in. I had an apartment there, and I was just rushing across the street, and like, really in this feeling of I'm so busy and important kind of vibe, like I've got all this stuff to do. And I saw this woman, Indian woman, actually, older Indian woman crossing the road. And I could tell she was struggling. And I had this moment like, oh, but I have a meeting. And so I rushed past her to go to the meeting. And I bring Indian up because I was like, afterwards thinking about it, I got to the meeting. Obviously, the meeting was great. I did great. But I felt so like crappy. Like I was like I could feel like, my heart felt like it was in my belly and I just felt icky,
Yeah.
And because I was like that, number one, it's a human, but number two, that could be my grandmother. And do I want people whipping by my grandmother like that? And then how did I say I want contribution and I say I want to be there for people. I say I want to empower women, but then there is this woman who needed my help, and it would have been like, 5 seconds, link her arm, walk her to the end, maybe take her groceries, like maybe help her find her, whatever her story was. You could tell it wasn't like I wouldn't have to stop my day for it. And then that night I was like, oh, you've lost the plot, girl. Yeah. You've lost the plot.
You lost the plot. I love that.
Yeah, you lost the plot. Also because I wasn't raised like that. I've always had people help me. I've always had it's like sort of, the plot really is like, when did I lie to myself that this kind of burn and churn is what is needed to live a good life? Like that's a lie, right? That's why for me, internal narrative is so much more important than external narrative. Like, yes, shape the perception. Yes, get your messaging right. But the messages you're telling yourself are the ones that people really hear, And I just felt like, so when did I decide to believe that? When did I think that that's what I had to do in the world? And again, I don't, there were times where I blamed myself and I was hard on myself. There still is, right? Where I'm like, really, Ushi? But ultimately I was like, oh, I get it. I get it why people do that, right? I get it why we get lost. I get it why the hamster wheel becomes the way of being. And also like, wait, I'm back on this thing again, same thing, right? I was like, how am I here? I own my own. I'm like, this is the freedom that everybody wants in the world. I can create my own schedule. I could tell that meeting, I wait 5 minutes, I'm taking care of something. And we can live in a world where that meeting can say, totally, Ushi, take 5 minutes. But look at what I chose to believe, that they are not going to understand. My livelihood's at stake. That meeting is more important than this woman. Like these are all the narrative decisions, the stories we make up. Right. That's where I say like, ooh, fail. That's where I feel like, oh, like,
that was
shifted around. Yeah. And look at what happens, whether you're in the company or you're in the business, that behavior comes with you, right? Like you have to shift the mindset and the behavior. Otherwise it's same cast of characters, same, or different cast of characters, but same story, right? In a different area. So, sure. And then you just start hating your work, which I don't hate my work, but in that moment I thought the work was to blame. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
You were on this, I'm relating. You get busy. You have to grow in confidence about who you are and what value you bring. In order for you to start to settle in. But there's this time you need to prove yourself. You need to test your thoughts, your work. You need to get feedback. But there, at some point, you need to kind of tap the brakes and go, okay, now I've done that little part there, but I want to be Steve. I want to bring Steve's perspective to things, not the copycat version of what everyone else is doing. And when I hear you talking about that, there's this path you're going, you're like, oh, I'm getting affirmation. This person's appreciating me. And you're like, but at some point you need to settle into you. And now I'm going to do me at my speed.
Yes.
At the way I do it, not to please people, but to try to settle into what I really can offer folks.
Yes. Yeah.
But I also think that requires a lot of confidence, Steve. And I want to talk a little bit about that with you, Ushi, because that must probably be one of the biggest barriers you have to your job. Not your confidence, but your client's confidence in themselves. Because to do that requires you to have faith and confidence that by me finally being who I am, that's going to translate into, hey, I got to pay a mortgage.
Right.
I have to further develop myself. Ushi, I'm sure that's probably one of the biggest, I don't know if this is the case, but one of your biggest barriers is how do you instill the confidence required for somebody to take those types of changes? Because those are big life changes that we're talking about.
Yeah, they are. And by the way, I don't necessarily advocate for a year-long sabbatical, especially like if you're paying a mortgage, like probably not smart. There were some circumstances at the time that gave me, you know, the ability to, including a lot of people who let me sleep on couches and things like that. Like, and my family, I had a very different situation. First, let me say this. Okay, so you see brands out there, right? And this is what I hear from, like, I work with such brilliant people, men too. They're brilliant. I mean, I don't mean to say it like men are brilliant too. Like brilliant men and women, high achieving. They're high achieving. The outcome of their work is priceless. And I say this all the time. They come in and they're like, I don't get it, Ushi. Like, you say that this is my value. You say this is incredible, but like I do it all the time. It's just what I do. So why would I take just what I do and put it out there as something special? Because it's not that special. And aren't there like 100 million other people out there like that, right? So this is like how they come in. And I get it. And the other side of it is like, I don't want to be arrogant. I don't want to feel like I'm bragging. I don't want to see my face everywhere. Like, these are the misconceptions of personal brand. And I had it too for a long time. So then they come in and we start talking. And there's things that light you up, right? But the danger of personal brand is that you just stay in the realm of yourself, right? So I don't teach that. Like, that's one piece of the puzzle. If you are in the realm of yourself, this is when you see a brand that you're just like, can you shut up already? Let's get super vain. You're just like, you know, because it's all about them. And then there are brands that are all about the audience because they are like, oh, cool. I know what the pain point is. And I figured out what the person should need to see, you know, they need to like hear. And this is when it becomes inauthentic and manufactured. And you're like, okay, that's cool. And I get that you've got this like thing going, but it's not really connected or plugged into who you are. So because so many people are operating here and here, that's why the misconception takes place that I either have to be this or this. I can't be me, right? So a large part of my process is, well, how can you build the bridge? Like, you know who you are, you know your value, you know your awesome sauce, and then you know your audience, and then your job is to build the bridge. And it's in that bridge that it becomes this less feeling of like, I can breathe into my bridge. I can say, what's my next best step? I can say, what's my way of talking about it? But you're not also just, you know, in rebellion or provoking to provoke, or I'm so me, but like you're not in touch with anybody, you know, or I'm manufacturing. Like, this is a large part of my my early story was I was like, oh, I know an audience and I know how to serve an audience, right? But I was leaving myself out, right? And then I went to, okay, I'm gonna talk so much about myself, and then people are like, yeah, but okay, we're done with that, right? Like they want also to know what you know. So the bridge is where I want people to live, and I also find that once you're living in that bridge, there's less convincing, there's less, you know, needing to promote, and you know, and that bridge gives other people the permission to be their own bridge, and that's sort of that ripple effect that I want to create in the world for men and women. But that's how we do it. Like they come in, they're super skeptical, and they're like, whatever, Ushi, I'll do what you say. Then they'll resist. Then we'll work on their internal narrative. And then they'll finally, there's this moment, it happened yesterday. Someone was like, I said, we need to position you as the powerhouse that you are. And she took a breath. She was like, oh yeah, actually I have built and sold 3 businesses and no one would ever know. And I was like, yeah. So see, like, what, you know, and she's hiding that because she's like, who wants to know? And I'm like, everybody wants to know. And especially in her topic area, it's like so needed. Especially with her voice and the way she does it, and her, you know, her trajectory. It's not for everyone, but the right kind of woman's going to come to her and be able to do the thing that she's saying because she's done it in her own life and they resonate. So like that for me, the bridge is about resonance. So that's what it means. And you know, Will, nobody has confidence. I mean, I think like I love Michelle Obama. I love some of these women that are right now, their job is to be, you know, out there in the public and on the stage, and them talking about getting nervous and, oh my goodness, like, I can't believe I said that. Or it's so, I don't know that there's really a place where I don't know that I say it. I don't even think I feel confident. I come across as confident. But what I feel is integrated and aware and okay, I may not know the answers, but I trust myself. And, I trust Steve, I trust Will, like we can be in this dialogue together. So that gives me and them confidence, but that's an interesting, like if anybody said to me, I'm feeling so confident, I'd be like, really? Like, how'd you do that?
Can you coach me?
Yeah.
Bill, there's a comment, I don't know if you saw it, from Bill. I'm going to take in a slightly different. Thanks, Bill, for doing that. It's like dating. You don't show all your crazy on the first date.
Yes, totally, Bill.
Right. But in that, so let's say, so you work with people and you help them kind of, and I'm going to paraphrase, build this identity that is partially certainly being true to themselves, but also not only speaking about themselves, but also their passion in others and bringing in those insights. But then my guess is you have to help your clients bring that out to meetings, to their social media, whatever that is, whatever the platform is. And maybe it's like that dating where the first date, you don't go all crazy. And so is there a process? Like, do you kind of help people find, like, don't go too crazy on the first date, but you get crazy on the third date or fourth date? Like, is there a process that you use to start helping people take that first step and then move from there?
That's so funny. By the way, lots of women get married after they do their personal brand. So I'm just gonna say, this is happen all the time because you're just like shining and you're so yourself, even with all your crazy. And somebody is like, wow, that's what, it just, that magnetism is there. It's a really good question. So first of all, I think everything is a brand, right? The way that you decorate your home or your office, the clothes you wear, the way you sip your Prosecco, like it's all making an impression. And I think that that can be intimidating, daunting, and like, oh my, there's no way I'm going to be able to do all of this, like in every moment, be super on. I'm going to have to like micromanage myself, and I'm going to always feel like I'm on the stage and I'm this pressure to perform. So what we do is like, it's the opposite of that. What we say is like, okay, we need to understand your alignment mechanism. What is the organizing principle of your brand so that you get that freedom and flexibility to show up? Usually it's a word or a concept or thought leadership, like what is your lived experience? What is the thing that you know? So show up as that. So interestingly, you commented about my energy, and I never would have thought it, but I had, I had known that I had, like, since I was a kid, people was like, you're so joyful and peaceful. And I thought, like, how silly that they think that. And I feel so far from my joy. And when I came back into what I felt like was my true joy, which apparently I never lost it, but like that's the whole thing. I was like, oh, that's my brand. So I am going to show up as this, who I am, like joyful and present. And is it 100% of the time? Totally no. Like, but then, you start to see, like, am I aligned? Am I aligned? Am I aligned? And then that's how you make it a moment to moment execution. Right. And I would say, like, let me just say this, like, so last year, another epic fail. I was in a mode of not listening to myself, and I hired an agency, a Facebook ads agency. I'm like, because this is going to get me out there. Everyone says I need a Facebook ads agency. Right. Never mind that for 20 years, my entire business was built on referrals. Never mind that. Never mind that the second I want to turn that faucet on, I have such great people in my world. I've built those relationships that they will, right? Now, let me, again, drop myself. See, that's what I mean. Like, the dropping of yourself isn't this epic, like, oh, I am a brand identity, and so I'm going to show up. It's like, hang on, what happened there, right? Misalignment. Yeah. And so then, they do this like onboarding process. And I was like, not unlike an onboarding process I would do. They asked all the right questions. And I'm like, are they listening to what I have to say? Like, is this really landing? No. Okay, whatever, it'll be fine. Facebook ads are the thing. And probably I came to this, like, the memo. I got the memo late because I'm sure everyone was thinking this 15 years ago. Facebook ads are the thing. And I'm like, oh, I'm waking up now. And I get like the regurgitation of what I said back from them. And I'm like, oh, this is like terrible. Like,
I hope I don't sound like that. Yeah.
I hope, well, and what it sounded like was an amazing textbook of marketing and branding. Yeah. And so it sounded like ChatGPT. Like, and I'm not against it. I love it. I'm just saying it sounded very vanilla. And you can see I'm not like vanilla. I love vanilla, but I'm not vanilla. And I I like went there and I looked at it and I still didn't speak out for myself. So then I was like, all right, whatever. They're going to like sell. I am like scrolling at night when I shouldn't be scrolling in Facebook and I see my own freaking ad and I want to puke.
Oh, that's right.
Like, I was like, this is 100% not what I teach women to do. If you're going to write an ad, fine, have the hooks, fine, understand the pain points, fine, talk clearly about the outcomes. But there's a way to do it that's conversational and true to you. And that wasn't it. Now, did it hit all the checkpoints of, whatever the formulas? Totally. Yeah. Totally. It was a great ad. But it wasn't performing even. And they kept saying to me, like, oh, I don't understand why it's performing. And then they started feeding back to me, maybe it's you. Maybe it's your product. Maybe it's your brand. Now, that's when I was like, that's not me. I'd had enough track record. Like, I know that the situation isn't that I'm wrong, right? And it's like that, that's what happens. And then I was like, okay, I wisened up to him. I was like, I don't think you're my agency. I even made it mean for a long time, maybe Facebook's not my jam. Yeah. But the question really there for me and anybody and whoever's listening is really like, is it or is it not my jam? That like, it can be your jam if you get your head right around it, right? And if you get your language and style and poise and find the right agency. So that's the work. That's the work of personal brand, is the alignment. Find the right agency for you. And there's still expertise there. And guess what? They had a good track record. That's why I went to them, right? Yeah. I was like, you have an amazing portfolio. In fact, of a lot of women that I respect, which is why I was there, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But I didn't do my due diligence. Like, let's go have coffee and let's see if I do this with my 4-year-old. Yeah. And now my 2-year-old comes up. He goes like this. I don't think they know what they're doing, but they love it. But yeah, so I just think it's really like, what's your alignment mechanism? Usually it's a word, usually it's a way of being. And like for me, I wasn't conveying joy in that ad. No way. Yeah. Right. And who's going to buy a personal brand lady that wants to tell you that one of her outcomes is joy? Like, nobody. I mean, people do, by the way, the right people. That's the point, right? It's not everybody. It's like the right people are resonating with me. So I think alignment, and everyone has one. Now, the other thing, one little piece, like you brought this up, Steve, the word was value. I think value is also value creation, and knowing what that is a really great alignment mechanism, because it also forces you to say, like, that ad is what a lot of other personal brand agencies do or personal brand companies do, but my value creation is X, Y, and Z. And so that is why I'm making this assessment that it's not aligned.
So I think about my journey. I'm relating. I'm thinking about what you're talking about. But you remember that first time you saw yourself, a recording of yourself on stage or something, and how embarrassed you were?
Totally.
Or you saw a picture of you from behind or from the side, and you always see yourself straight on in the mirror. It's kind of a shock. To hear your voice, it's a shock. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's me. But then when you flip it and you think of all the people that enjoy being around you, they value that. They appreciate that. And you have to get over, in that personal brand journey, you have to back up and go, wait a minute, don't be so critical. But people are seeing something here they really appreciate. What is it? And let's dial that in because they like it. Why do you reject it? Well, you're seeing yourself from the outside. And it's like, I just remember being just cringing so much. But then later you get past it because people like it.
Yes. They love the idiosyncrasies, and they love, see, like this idea of to have a magnetic and influential brand, I have to be a sage on the stage, and I have to look like I have it all together. Like much of what you see as like, I know lots of moms experience this where they're like, how the heck did that mom have time to go do her makeup and have a photo shoot? Because I'm clearly wiping the throw up out of my hair right now. Like, and it is when I started to embrace those stories. It's what you said, Steve. People are like, oh, thank you for saying that. But meanwhile, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely the only mom doing that. Like, I'm definitely the only mom who can't get a shower in today. No, of course not. Like, so I think that's right. I think that it's, I want people to be refined. I want them to be polished because that also sends a certain message. But those quirks and those nuances of who you are, that's how people fall in love. And this idea that to be successful, you need a mass. You do not, right? You just need your people to resonate with you and all these things that you do. And then you have a business there, and the other big part of that is lived experience. So what I mean by that is, like, I think for a long time, sob story was like a thing in marketing, like tell your sob story and people will resonate. And I feel like don't tell your sob story, but do tell your story of once I was there and now I'm here, and make the once I was there super simple, right? I have one woman who just incredible work with people who've experienced trauma. And she doesn't go into all her traumas. Now, I'm going to tell you, she's had every single, like, you're just like, how are you standing and functional and wonderful and raise these kids? Like, how'd you do that? Of course, that's her thought leadership and that's her gift. She doesn't say the entire story. She just says, like, look, I had a childhood that was really hard for these reasons. And now this is what I've learned. So I think if you can dwell in that space, then the who you are just sort of naturally is born in every moment. Right.
Steve, I was thinking about when you're talking about when you kind of look at yourself and you're so hard on yourself. I struggle to this day with that. One of the things that helped me a lot was this analogy that got me over this idea of being so critical on yourself. And here's what I do. It may be helpful to somebody out there in the audience, is I always think when you go to a wedding, the wedding party, everyone in there, they have this amazing time. They have great drinks, special food, and everything else. Now, behind the scenes, you realize all the things that went wrong. Like, even in my own wedding, things, the photographer didn't show up until it was late. My best man didn't show up until 10 minutes before, but nobody out there knows that stuff. And so when I thought about that, but they all still had an amazing time. So I like to think to myself as like, I know the small little details that went wrong. I didn't say the right word on stage. I actually I took two ideas, put them together, confused those ideas. And then, so I get off phone calls all the time and I'm like, God, I did a terrible job. And then my partner will be on the phone. He's like, Will, you just killed it. I'm like, oh no. And he's like, your audience has no idea those little details that you think are so important. And I think that helps me get around. Like, it's like at a wedding, very few weddings have I gone to that I hated, but behind the scenes, there's never been a perfect wedding ever. There's always things behind the scenes that you'll never know about. The host knows, the bride knows, everything else. But that's always gotten me around that idea that I don't have to be perfect because the audience doesn't know. Your insecurities, if they do see them, are incredibly endearing. And those things that you think people saw, the vast majority of them, people did not see them at all anyways. When your hair was off, you had to throw up in your hair. Nobody really saw it.
Well, I smelt it, but the interesting thing there is, like, look at the narrative at play. Like, in order to have what I want, in order to have impact, in order to be worth something, I have to be perfect, right? And there's so many reasons why that's in place. Like, people, that's what you heard from your parents, or a teacher said that, or like, you pick it up along the way. So it's not like this. Like, I don't want it to feel like, oh my gosh, I have to like climb a mountain with my narrative. Just, but that's what's at play there. That's really what we've all decided to believe, is that I'm going to, and if I pick myself apart, I'm humble, or whatever. I mean, those are mine. I just mentioned mine. I've noticed that that's kind of what I do, because it's the same thing. I'm like, nobody's noticing. Nobody, in fact, they're experiencing the opposite. They're experiencing that, like that, the essence and the beauty of who you are. And how cool would it be if we just like had every interaction in our world that was just like, we're experiencing each other in that way. It would be very like less forced. I feel like we'd all be, I mean, I know for me, I can't say, I can't make a blanket statement there, but like for me, I am at ease. I am calm. I feel that confidence that we were talking, like I feel that certainty when I'm just like, okay, here I am,
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you get to the point, you see yourself, you're embarrassed, but then you kind of get past it.
Yeah.
And then you stop focusing on you.
There you go.
And then you show up in a meeting, you show up to deliver what value you have to offer. And you're in this, it's not cocky, but in this stage that if they're put off by some aspect of me, it's okay, because we're not a good fit.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'm totally comfortable with that, because I don't want to hang out with people that are wanting to fix me or critical of me or don't value my perspective. And my perspective is just as legitimate as anyone else's.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one time I was visiting Japan, and I'm a pimply faced kid, and I go into a bank to get a bank account, right? And
Yeah.
this Japanese man, he befriends me, and he just treats me really, really respectfully and everything. Long story short, he invites me to his house, and they put on this spread. I'm a nobody,
Mm.
and they're treating me with all this respect. And I'm sitting there, and I look up on the wall, and there, he has an idol. I don't know what the religion was, but he has this idol on there, and I'm looking at him. He has 2 kids just like my dad, and I'm going, if I this could be my family, but in Japan.
Yes.
And what they see on the world is as legitimate as mine or my dad's. And at that point, my mind's blown that God was not an American. He's not wearing overalls and a John Deere hat, right?
Yeah.
And it was like, my mind was blown. But it was
Yeah.
their perspective
Yeah.
was just as legitimate as mine.
Yes. Yeah.
And once you can kind of settle in that, I think you're starting to be in your own personal brand. Would you agree?
Yeah. And I also think that all of a sudden you realize it also doesn't really matter if they accept or reject me, right?
Mhm.
Because the other narrative that runs is that if you're liked, you'll be successful. And that's not true, right? There's so many people who do great things in this world that don't like each other together, like in a collaborative effort, because they have to, right? Whatever. They have to like the fires or the ice storm, and they have to work together to figure out how the neighborhoods can get back on track, right? So I think we do a disservice to ourselves and and each other when we keep trying to wrong or right the other, or wrong or right ourselves, and I think that you really nailed it. Like I think for me, rejection is a good sign because it tells me where I shouldn't be focusing my time or energy. It's not a sign of failure. It's not a sign of the end. In fact, it's like really good data, right? And then if I'm rejecting somebody or judging somebody, I'm blocking myself from the things that I want too, right? So the second that you start to be like, I'm here, yeah, your personal brand doesn't have to be a try. It is. Like there's nothing that you have to try to do in that moment.
That's a great quote right there.
Thanks.
After that quote there, Steve, we'll use it somewhere on my blog.
Yeah.
We need some new material.
So your personal brand is.
It is. Yeah. And then the thing is, this is also why, blueprint, formula, business plan. Okay, my teachers are like gonna kill me for saying this, but I think the exercise of getting clear around your business plan is great. But we all know the business plan the next day, it's irrelevant, right? I think it's better to come back and align to your personal brand and then say, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? Right? It doesn't mean that what's next, there's an excellence or rigor or a framework around it. It's just that we're trying to live by these plans, everybody else's blueprint, everybody else's formula. Also, we know that's what converts. That's why you use that word, blueprint, formula. But then we're all these unique individuals trying to fit into these blueprints. And believe me, I hundreds of thousands of dollars on freaking blueprints in my world, and all to come back to this where I'm like, wow, I'm the most joyful, I'm the most successful or fulfilled in my terms when I align to who I am and ask what's next. And then also what ends up coming, and to me, it can sound a little esoteric, but like always the what's next, like kind of just runs into you. Like you're just like, oh, there's no, like, again, TED Talk, like there was no way I could have orchestrated that. Right? How? Like there's no way that person and I would ever connect. We're not in the same circles. Like it was just so beautiful. And again, I was just being me. And by the way, I was a complete dork at reading the poetry. Like I was like no rhythm and awkward and whatever. but I was me. I was,
That worked.
the energy
Right?
was there. Yes.
You know,
Yes.
that real quick, Will, that point about the plan and the business plan, I think is the exercise is basically what we're really saying is, don't we have what it takes to just accomplish or overcome or maneuver around whatever it is that's going to unexpectedly pop up? That's basically what we're saying. And in a personal brand, that's what you're really helping people understand, Ushi, is that, look,
Yeah.
you have what it takes to accomplish or move into whatever your next role is. You just need to settle into it and recognize that, right?
Yes. And then again, like, so I'm bringing up these narrative points because they're the ones that I've identified as like the top 10, right? But the one that inhibits that is like, I'm not skinny enough. I don't have enough degrees. I don't have enough certifications to have a personal brand or to be out there or to be, contributing to the world in the way I do. Right. And so it's always this place of like, not enough. Like, this is again where goal setting can work against you because you're always focused on the gap. And so you create more gap. And I think what's beautiful about what you said is that, yes, build it from the wholeness of who you are. There's always places we can improve, and there's always things that we're going to learn forever. There's that's always going to be there. But you can't wait till you're the perfect weight to have what you want or to affect the change that you're here to, that you're blessed and gifted to do, So I think that's partly what I was feeling. It was like funny that my life felt like it was in motion on the outside and I felt really busy, but I was super stagnated in that moment, right? Where I wasn't really contributing the way I wanted to. And yet there was contributions. Like, it's really, really strange place to be in. I mean, like it has its symptoms too, right? You get the fatigue and all that, but yeah, that's the thing is you could be in motion but feel stagnated if you approach it from a gap, right? Like, I have to be something else to again, back to that, I have to change who I am to have what I want is the predominant narrative. And you don't, you can have a few roles and still be successful.
Will Leach, another great guest.
I know. I just feel like there's a whole bunch of little quotes that you should have been capturing so that I can talk about them on future shows. You can tell you're a poet. We can tell actually you're a poet. There's like
I am a poet.
Yeah. It comes from a great place. That's what makes it good, right? Is that it comes not from something you read or tried to memorize. It's just coming from the heart, and that's what the world needs a little bit more of anyway.
Thank you. Yeah,
thank you so much for being on the show today, Ushi Patel, founder and CEO of Ushi. Hey, Ushi, before we go, how can people, I don't know if you want people to contact you. How can people reach out and learn about you, talk to you? Understand, how do we reach to you?
It's so funny because also like people would think I'm amazing at social media, and I'm like, no, I stink at it. So the best way to reach me, if you want to work with me or connect or collaborate or partner, is just go to ushipatel.com. There is a link there to book a 15-minute call. I really enjoy any kind of conversation and connection around work together. And, follow me on LinkedIn. I mean, like, I'm just going to be clear. The best way to reach me is my website.
A woman of the times.
And I love it. Yeah. Yes. Let's talk. I mean, I really want it. Also, I'll say too, that part of what I'm noticing is that it does feel like there's a lot to do around personal brand. So what I will continue to do over the next year on ushipatel.com is really create steps. So maybe right now you need to do stage presence. Well, here's how you're going to work on your stage presence and with whom. I'm a poet, but didn't get a good grade in English. I'll just say that right now. So keep coming. Come back to Ushi Patel, connect with me on LinkedIn, and let's start there.
And Will Leach, there's people that want to work with you, brother. How do they get to talk?
That's right. I think the best thing you can do is if you were looking to increase the effectiveness of your marketing using behavioral science and now neuroscience, hopefully pretty soon Steve, is go to mindstategroup.com. I have lots of cool little red buttons that you can book time with me, and we can actually look at your advertising together for me to give you some best practices from a neurological or psychological perspective. So mindstategroup.com, everybody.
Will, we're glad you're back from your let's go eat a hamburger in some foreign country.
The best.
Burger paradise.
Right? Yes.
Yeah. Apparently not as good as India's, but it's up there.
Don't go to India for a burger. There's so many other things to go there for. Don't go there.
That's funny. All right. It's the Mindstate Marketing Hour. Did you know we're a podcast? That's right. iHeartRadio, Buzzsprout, Stitcher, all of those places you can listen. And if you want to watch, remember that show is called, I forget. Oh, Chauncey Gardner. He likes to watch. If you like to watch, it's on YouTube. It's the Mindstate channel. We'll see you next week on the Mindstate Marketing Hour. Will, thank you. Great show, Ushi. What a great guest. Enjoyed the conversation. Okay, so now I'm going to hit end broadcast and let's all sing something during this time. You want to?